Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've all had a nice break, a cup of coffee, walk around the kitchen, wherever you have to be doing a walk around the office. I'd like to welcome you all here to this particular workshop with Adam, which is around the whole concept of campaigning and also about the necessity to about looking at the language of engaging men around the types of campaigns that he has been involved in. So Adam, he is the managing director of Language, which is I'll let you explain where you come from yourself, Adam, if that's okay. But I think more to say that Adam's experience, I came across Adam about 25 years ago in another life when I was involved with the Access Project in Ballymun and around the whole graphic design and illustration, but also it's moved into that whole communicating element as what the organization as Language would say it is in terms of how it's called, what it says about. So he has had huge experience in working within the third sector in Ireland, especially around social campaigns, including the marriage equality and the Eighth Amendment as well. So with that, we asked Adam to come in to really talk about those practical things when we talk about creating social change and attitudes and how you need to do that and what needs to happen in terms of marketing campaigns around that. We thought this would be useful. So I'll leave it over to Adam now to speak and say and do what he has to do. Cheers, Adam.
Thanks,
Thank you again.
Thank you. So what I was hoping to do was, we've got an hour here. And what I was hoping to do was make this more of a participative workshop. And just given the complexities of working online, working over Zoom, I was going to basically give you a very brief introduction and outline to our approach in Language, and then do a piece of work with Seán, and then bring in yourselves to get your contributions. As Seán was saying, we've been working in the campaigning and advocacy sector for over 30 years, and what we have developed over that time is it's a highly collaborative and cooperative approach, working with the organizations that we're lucky enough to work with. I am just going to share my screen now so that I can start just taking you through some of the slides that I have. Because the introduction to this, it's the learnings.
Sorry, Adam.
Yeah.
Would you mind just pressing play at the top so it goes into full presenter mode?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be using this in this mode, so.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Fine. Yeah. Thanks for the checking in though. Yeah, the learnings that I suppose I have to contribute at this stage really come out of the experience that we've had really from 2014, the preparation for the 2015 civil marriage equality referendum, and then very much on the back of that, like starting 2016, was the research and preparation for the repeal referendum in 2018. And what that has, it's really given us, I suppose, a perspective on campaigning, which, it's not unique, but it's of value, and it's always a value for me to remind ourselves how we do it and why we do it. I mean, when I started out in communications, all of the talk was about behavioral change campaigns, and it was about, really kind of how do you study, and the way I interpreted it was how do you study and manipulate people to get them to behave the way you want them to behave. So, the steps were, it was identifying your objective, your strategy, identifying your target audience, and then looking at how do you reach them and what do you want them to think and believe, and how do you want them to behave. And when we get into more kind of political campaigning, you've got this adversarial campaign model, which is very similar, but you are looking at, you're basically looking at an audience that you are scrapping over, you're competing for between you and your opposition. And I think there is something important in this for us to consider, and that is that when we're talking about men, we can see, like, the status quo is not a passive status quo. It is something that it's impacting on men, is telling men, giving men information all day, every day about how they should behave, what's desirable, and also what the threats are if they don't behave as well, if they don't behave the way that is the way that gender norms define for them. So what I'm going to look at now is this idea of our target audience, and the way in which we shifted our perspective as communicators was, rather than thinking of our target audience, what we did was we moved to this, what we call an empowering campaign model, and we looked at who shares our values. And so rather than seeing your audience as something for you to go after and change, what you're really looking at is you're looking for the people who are on your side, who share your values. And rather than expecting them to come over to your side, you're really shifting to where they are. You're trying to understand what they think and feel, and the kind of language that they use. And it moves your kind of campaigning position from the sidelines to where they are. So, your objective then becomes one of giving voice to those people who share your values. And in order to do that, what we've learned is the value of research. One of the things that we find when we, working in this sector, is that between us and yourselves, the people who are in campaigning organizations, we can make a very good guess about, your members, your constituents, the people who you represent. But particularly when it comes to broader demographics, and like particularly for those two referendums where we had to get over 50% of the population, what we have to do is go outside of our immediate spheres of contact. We need to get outside of the bubbles, and we need to look at how the public think and feel. And this, for anyone who's involved in research, you will know all of this. But there are two, forms of research. There's what's called qualitative, which is the focus group type of research. And the way I kind of think about this is, it's like going to Antarctica and boring holes at particular points. And what you're doing is you're taking samples at very particular points in the massive geography of the Antarctic, and you are bringing a number of individuals together, and you're talking with them, and you're hearing what they have to say, and you're probing that, so you get to do a kind of a deep piece of work where you get an understanding of people's thinking and feelings. You get an understanding of the real ways in which they think and feel about issues. And what you can then do with that is you can use it as an indicator, to build a set of indicators that you can then test more broadly in the population. And that's where we look at the other type of research, which is the quantitative. And as in the name, quantitative, it's the quantity, it's the numbers. So quantitative, that's polling research, where you ask, those things that you learned in the focus groups, how do they scale up? How representative or pervasive are the opinions that you found out about during the focus group work? You learn how big is the challenge, and you learn also where are challenges and opportunities. So you're able to look at the data through say a population lens, and you're able to see perhaps that there's greater affinity with your purpose amongst certain age groups or certain demographics. And you can also see where the resistance lies as well, and that would just be proportionately. It's never the case that all young people think one thing and all older people think another thing. But what you often find is that more young people think one thing and more older people think another thing. So it's about percentages and weightings. And one of the things I've just learned today, I'll just show you this slide here. You can learn about behaviors, and you can also learn about opinions. But this was one of these the shocking things that came out of the poll that the Men's Development Network have been involved with. This was around pornography usage. So here you've got a really good example of a quantitative poll that reveals behaviors. And what that would give us is it gives us a certain amount of data, and what we then have to decide is what do we do with this. So you have this extraordinary revelation that you are looking at. Basically 3/4 of men are using pornography all the time, we can bring our own perspectives to kind of think about the implications of this. But I find this really shocking, and it's a really good example of how you can use quantitative studies to give yourself a rock solid position to campaign from. So this, for example, you could use this as benchmarking data, and you could say, well, in 10 years' time, I want to see this cut by half, and that would be a sign of success for us if we did a campaign that was tackling pornography. So back to our empowering campaign model. Rather than our target audience, we are looking for the people who share our values. What we're calling this is the ethical base, or the ethical pillar of our campaign. So identifying who shares our values is really important. Then what we're looking for is who do they already connect with? Who do they already identify with? And this is especially important for campaigns in the non-commercial sector, and especially important where we are giving voice to people who already share our values. What we don't have is massive budgets. What we never have is massive budgets. So we can't buy our way into people's hearts and minds. What we need to do is work with who they already listen to, who they already trust. So this is again something that you can test through the qualitative work, and you can verify through quantitative. For example, with the 2018 referendum, what we saw was two very interesting patterns where the people who were conditional supporters for the provision of abortion in Ireland, the first people they wanted and needed to hear from was medical professionals. Whereas for people who were very clear about women's right to choose, the voice that they wanted to hear from and the voice that they trusted was from women who'd had abortions. So interesting, from a campaigning point of view, just to understand that different people who are in different places with an issue may have different voices that they need to hear from. Lastly, then, the rational pillar is what do we need to deliver? What do we need to? How do we use the voices? How do we use those social connections to deliver information or facts? And And that gives us the position to offer people something to do. So we've identified the people who are on site already, and we know who they listen to, who they trust. We know what they need in the way of information or in the way of motivation. And then what we can do as a campaign is offer them ways to activate their ethical position. And you know, everyone will be at a different place for this. And the job of a campaign is to offer a stepping stone that is close enough to where the person is at this point in time. So whether that is to make a donation, you saw that happening in 2018 with the repeal referendum. If it's to wear a badge, you know, you saw that happened at different times, whether it was the repeal t-shirts or through to, you know, wearing a badge on the day saying I voted. And, you know, different people have different thresholds at which they can engage and visibly declare how they are supporting the campaign. It may be completely invisible. It may just have been in the ballot box where they activated their shared ethical position. So our empowering model looks like this. It's these three pillars: the ethical, where people are already, with their values, with their are their values aligned with the vision that we can offer them for change. The social pillar, so that's who shares their ethical purpose, who do they trust, and what do they need to hear. And the way we see it operating is that the connectedness that they already have, the voices that they already trust, can deliver this the information that they need. And really what happens then is they join the dots. They understand how this is relevant to them. So that movement from the information to the actions can be offered by the campaign, but they are taken up by the individual. And as I say, they're taken up in different ways depending on where they are at any point in time. The other thing we learned was that, you know, when you're in an adversarial change position, it's tempting to think of the public as something that is kind of caught between you. Whereas, you know, when we saw the quality of the campaigning that had preceded 2018, the type of anger and the type of quite violent language that was used in the abortion debate, what we learned was that the public disassociate themselves from a campaign when it is argued in those terms. So the more polarizing a debate gets, the more angry a debate gets, the more the public shut it out and the more they do not want to know about it. So looking at say the 2015 referendum, the starting point that we had was this kind of polling from 2014, where there was 42% strong support, and what was described as in the polling analysis was 38% soft support. So the target audience for that campaign was that soft support, and that was the target. That was the people who we were giving voice to with the Yes Equality campaign. For the 2018 campaign for abortion in Ireland, what we were looking at was a more complex mix, where we had 23% strong support, we had 34% soft support or conditional support. That's those who support abortion in certain circumstances. And then we had this 31% who, again, support abortion in much more restricted circumstances. So what we were looking at for our target audience here, who we were giving voice to with this campaign, was this kind of 65% who were really going to be the decisive population when it came to delivering a successful referendum result. And this was the first time that we saw, I suppose that we saw in numerical terms or data terms, that we had a distinct group in the middle. And back to our kind of yes, no blend, we knew that that really wasn't true. And what we showed that with the polling was that we had three different groups. We had those who supported yes without restrictions, so they understood that principle of reproductive rights. We had this large group for whom their support was conditional, and then we had the anti-abortion group who would never support it under any circumstances. And we named this group in the middle, the Concern Centre. And again, that was our target audience for Together for Yes. And it was that group that this type of messaging was designed to work with. A woman you love might need your yes. So that idea of helping, if we're talking about information, it's the understanding that abortion is always relevant for any woman of reproductive age. It's relevant to anyone who knows a woman of reproductive age. So it's this point that it's close to you, it's immediate, and it also is, it could be anytime it's relevant to you. So with our model, and through our qualitative research, what we found was that there's a breakup between these things, particularly when you have an issue where there's been a high level of silence, a high level of say taboo around the subject. What you find is that first of all, people don't connect their own moral purpose with the kind of change that we're looking for. They don't have that social connectedness with the issue because they're afraid to talk about it. And because they're afraid to talk about it, they don't get to hear their own words. They don't get to develop their own thinking around it. So people's kind of rational pillar becomes diminished as well. So the job of the campaign, I mean, I was listening to Seán earlier at the beginning and talking about this idea of feeling confident. One of the things that campaigning can do is it can help connect people with their own sense of ethical purpose, but it can also give them that sense that they're not alone as well. So building up that sense of social permission, and as a campaign, using that to deliver giving them the opportunity to hear alternative viewpoints, that the pervasive information that they're getting from the culture is not the only information. And again, this is another slide that I picked out from the findings of the poll that was delivered earlier today. And I think this is a really nice example of really showing how perhaps men feel a bit isolated when it comes to dealing with these issues. That they may think that that their position is at odds with the world around them, with how the society feels about how they should figure out their own personal problems, and the extent to which they can ask for help from other people. So what I was going to do, that's what I've done really is take you through kind of the approach that we've developed, this empowering campaign model. And as I say, it is something that has developed through practice. So what I was going to do is I was going to do a little bit of work with Seán on this, just looking at engaging, I'm calling it engaging and enabling men, rather than, I think, awareness and prevention campaigns is what it was billed as. But what I would be interested to do just for a couple of minutes is take any questions that you might have. because I do know that, you know, this is my perspective from my experience working on these campaigns, and I know there are very different perspectives and experience out there as well. So just at this point, are there any questions on the experience that we have had, and this idea of this model? You can unmute yourself or put your hand up if you do have a question or a comment. Okay, what I'll do is I'll move on, and what we can do is, you know, there'll be plenty of time, I'm sure, and we can talk about the idea of the approach, as well as how the approach is relevant to men. So if we were to talk about who shares our values, I think one of the big questions that I think we have, particularly in the you know, given that it's about gender norms, I think one of the things we need to be able to articulate is what it is we're offering. So at the moment, you know, what I've done is I've given us a from and to. So Seán, can I ask you, what are people offered at the moment? What are men offered at the moment? And what can we offer them as an alternative?
Well, I think men are offered a kind of a limited understanding of masculinity.
And what are the qualities? What are the qualities of that?
The qualities of that, I suppose, there are the qualities of that are. I suppose if I kind of classify the things, what they say, just like the likes of Stoicism that was mentioned earlier on. Okay, like, so that this is a value that we say that men should aspire to, is that whole notion of Stoicism, being in charge, being a leader, being strong. Like I don't want to say not something, if you get me. You know, I'd rather be concerned. These are the words. These are the things that are the expectations of men. Are that they will be physically strong, that they would be, that they'd also be in charge, that they would be, you know, that they wouldn't. I suppose here, this is the thing about saying that they wouldn't be emotionally available, that they wouldn't seek support, that they wouldn't express, they wouldn't be emotionally intelligent, and also that they are sexist, you know, and you know, so that, I think they're the things that we see. Yeah, I don't know if you need more than that in terms of the exercise.
And what would you offer as an alternative?
Well, I think we would offer an alternative where that we provide a space for men to be their most authentic selves. That we would offer them a space in which they can reflect on how they feel and why they feel, that they have that they would be emotionally, they would be empathetic, that they would be I suppose generous of spirit, they would be willing to listen, willing to be led, willing to be leaders and I mean that in terms of what I consider the concept of true leadership as opposed to the masculine understanding of leadership. And of course, that would also mean being allies and being kind of agents of change, and somebody as men we would model the type of behavior that we want to model, that we want to see men behave, how men behave.
What would they be giving up in order to be this?
Oh, great question. I think would they be giving up the easy options? I think there are elements of inequality that are still beneficial for men, that they would be giving up these things. So I think, well, I'll preface that by saying they're not necessarily things that they're giving up, but the perception is that they are giving things up. Okay, I think that there will be a perception that they'd be giving up things that they have felt that they have fought hard and won, right? In terms of a certain element of they wouldn't call it privilege, but that's what it is. Things that they're things of privilege, So, and some of that is about the easy option, to be able to step back from a more caring role or a more emotional role that you would place within the family. So those kind of they're easy options. You can step back from them, that you can
sorry, Seán.
Yeah.
Seán?
Yes?
Sorry, does cultural value come into all this?
There's cultural values.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I think all those, for me, I think it is the whole aspect of where men sit within their own society, within their own country, culture is truly impacts how they behave. So I think the things that they will be giving up, I'm not so sure if it's I think I'd probably giving up is not this perspective I come into on this, Adam. In some ways, I'll be saying about these are the things that that are perceptions of that you might be giving up. You know what I mean? Like they're not necessarily true that you're giving up your sense of privilege or your sense of equality that you have. But it is obvious that when you have a more equal society, the benefits that accrue far outweigh the potential privilege that you might have. Would that be fair?
But you can admit that there's a cultural struggle there, though, no?
Sorry, I can't actually hear that.
You can admit that there's a cultural struggle there.
I think so.
Because coming from one culture to another and trying to embrace the culture you're in now, there's a cultural struggle there,
Yeah.
And for men, that's a difficulty for them to accept, really.
Oh, I think that's a very really good point. I think, especially if you're moving from one culture to another, absolutely, and the different traditional values and the traditional norms that are expressed in one culture into another is a real challenge when you have the intersectionality of race, religion, sexuality. It's quite intersectional, I think, in that respect.
Yeah. Thank you.
If we're looking at these things, these messages here, though, it would feel like you're giving up power, control. just looking at what we have here, I'd be inclined to put it like what I'm looking for is what are the reasons why men wouldn't go for these things here.
Yeah.
What looks like the price that you pay. And that's why, like, I think what we need to do is go into this with our eyes wide open, and that means being really honest about what it is, what are the things that hold us in place at the moment. So privilege, power, control.
Strength.
I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Say again.
Strength. Okay. Influence.
Influence is great. I would say entitlement is one of the kind of underpinning principles. And the reason why, what I like about entitlement is that it's relative. Even if you often hear men saying, "Well, I'm not privileged," and the difference between privilege, I suppose, and entitlement is that entitlement is about your, the fact that it's about having a certainty of place. And in fact, I would be inclined to say giving up certainty would be another kind of emotional.
It's one of our questions we ask Adam in some of our workshops, and when we're working with men, it's kind of saying, what part of the patriarchy doesn't work for you? And sometimes the next question back is, what are you talking about patriarchy? But but it is that sense around our privilege, and they say, I'm not privileged in any shape or form. I live in I come from a socioeconomic group that's this. I'm unemployed. I live alone. I don't have a family, or whatever. The whole range of various different things that they would then perceive themselves in, that they wouldn't see they're privileged at all. Yeah. And yet, they will defend the system because it gives them entitlement, even if it's just to know that they're a little bit more powerful than somebody else. And what sexism tells us is that we are almost always more powerful than the most powerful woman. Okay.
Can we add the language barrier there? No.
Into which of the
I feel like giving up, because when they cannot express themselves really because of language barrier, then it becomes something else.
Okay, so this would be, what this would give us is the starting point to look for the people who might be interested in this type of change, this type of message. You would be looking for people who understand, who get this as an alternative to what we have already. And I think it's interesting that we don't have equality in there. And I think that may be something that we need to put in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because I think if, what is interesting to me, I think, is that equality is the exact opposite of entitlement. And it also, what it does is it, rights is also, it's another thing that contradicts entitlement. Once we as a society establish rights, it really flies in the face of entitlement. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just move on to, I'm just going to shift this one up as well. Because it's like we have the overall kind of principles that we're moving from sexism to equality, and it feels like we're giving up entitlement. So these are the barriers. These are the barriers to change. These are the things that might encourage people towards change. So the next piece that I would put in then is the social connectedness. Now, what we don't have is, we don't have a profile of the kind of men who we are looking to here, but the reality is all men are affected by this. And so, Seán, who would you say are the kind of voices that men do listen to, with regards to, like, particularly in relation to this piece here, this idea of the authentic self, this idea of being empathetic, being willing to be led. Who do you see as being, role models in that regard? Like, is it types of people or is it individuals?
I think it's generally, there's certain individuals, to be certain champions that would have come forward over the past couple of years. Very much people around expressing themselves around their own vulnerability, whether around their health or their mental health or their physical health. So you'd have somebody to say, like Brezzi, for one person who talked about his mental health in a particular way.
Is that BRSSIE?
Yeah. He's a singer, songwriter, it's a whole range of stuff like that. And even somebody to say who's most likely Richie Sadlier, who's written a book recently around boys and stuff like that. He's a psychotherapist and an ex-footballer. But I'm trying to think of, there will be, I think our president is a significant role model in relation to engaging men and boys and working through a strengths-based approach and in a non-judgmental way. I think it's really important. I think there's been quite a couple of sports people who have stepped out because of their profile, have stepped out into the arena and expressed their vulnerabilities in terms of where they were at, to encourage other men to do the same. So that's been kind of really important. I think there are organizations like ourselves that talk about it, I suppose, in terms of MDN as an organization would do it, and they might listen to or they may not. So I think in terms of, say, within Irish society, you're just looking to see when we talk about equality, or when we talk about engaging men and boys, who else will be out there? And I think there's not a huge amount, you have to say, who will be there, or I don't know whether they're given the platform. There are lots of men, I suppose. This is what there are lots of men and lots of men working in circles with each other, supporting each other. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to talk about it too, for that matter. But the platform to do it isn't there. And that, like, it's been very interesting. Tommy Tiernan it's been very interesting in terms of his program, and how he has engaged with men on that program. Like, it was a very different kind of feeling when you do talk to Tommy Tiernan, because a lot of people come on, whether it's the producers or whoever, have come on and they've talked about themselves in a very, very open way. Yeah. So he'd be a person that's an advocate to allow that conversation to happen, I think, and has been. I don't know if anyone else has other people out there, please throw them in. Yeah.
One of the things we always find when testing trusted voices is people who are like family and friends are always really important.
Really important, yeah.
And that could be, people could include work colleagues as well amongst those, but it is, we saw how important and influential those personal connections were in both of those referendum campaigns. And, particularly the ones that kind of confounded people's or contradicted people's stereotypes. That amazing couple who were talking about civil marriage equality, the older rural couple. It's those types of pieces of conversation and video and those calls, the encouragement to call your granny, all of those types of engagements.
Those personal, and I think as well, I suppose when you say about engaging, who do people, men, listen to and trust, women is a really important, whether mothers, daughters, nieces, whatever it may be, partners, wives, are very, very, really influential around that. And I suppose it's part of the social conditioning that they feel that it's women who they can only really express their emotions to, or should express their emotions to.
Yeah, and it also, I suppose one of the aspects of that is how do you do it in a way that doesn't reassert that kind of patriarchal role? Like, how do you, this idea of an authentic self, how do you challenge somebody? How do you challenge a man to be his authentic self?
Well, I think it's the language, as you say there. It's about the invitation. It's the invitation in as opposed to the challenge. The challenge is to society, but the invitation is to the individual. So that but I get your point that there's no point if you have to target those who they trust and listen to. You don't reinforce those kind of societal norms. I think I don't want to try and get to the next bit in my head.
So jumping to what do they need to hear? What do you think they need to hear?
Well, they need to hear other men's voices. I think those champions, they need to hear them, and they need to be. I think they do need to hear facts like what we have there in terms of the interim results on the man survey. They need to hear these things as well. Those qualitative or quantitative stats in relation to what's actually happening for men in terms of their attitudes to their own lives. How they feel society reflects their morals, their moral compass, or whatever it is that they would see, or their attitudes and their values. I think.
What do you think would motivate men?
I think what motivate men will be is that they know that they have a much richer life emotionally.
What else?
I think what would motivate men is that they felt that the women and children in their lives would be safe, would be safer, and that the sons in their lives could reach their true potential. Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me is there's a sense here that that a lot of this is about you know, it's benefit to others, and I wonder you know, this one here is for them. And I suppose I'm reminded of the barriers, you know, the barriers that we looked at back here, you know, that you're giving up entitlement, feels like you're giving up entitlement and certainty, power and control. And that's where, you know, I suppose it's telling people I suppose it's helping men understand that what they have to give up is nothing compared to what they have to gain. What else would you offer them?
I suppose you could, like, in terms of a healthier life, in terms of a physically healthier life, you know, we know that if you have a richer emotional life, there's a less chance that you'll involve in risky behaviors that will cause you ill health, whether that's in drinking or drugs or addiction or overwork, you know, all those type of things. So I think you're offering that particular perspective as well.
Can I jump in on one thing there?
Please,
okay. Yeah, thanks. Is there something about like a much richer emotional life for many, particularly if somebody doesn't perhaps feel like they have a rich emotional life? It's kind of an abstract term. Is there something about kind of getting a little bit more concrete? Just picking up on some of the things you say there, Seán, but also I always like the way you express that idea of men and boys authenticity. Is there something about actually stating what that could be? You know, being in terms of freedom to be yourself. If you are, in terms of your sexuality, in terms of your interests, in terms of, the things that you feel are important, kind of something that really homes in on kind of breaking that binary around, so what's a masculine interest and what's what's something that kind of gets denigrated as a feminine, or, to use that really old-fashioned term, like something that's a bit sissy, or, that kind of, is there something about kind of being a bit more explicit on what that freedom might be? Sorry, just to offer that. No,
I think sometimes you forget the wood. You can't see the wood for the trees, as you say. No. So if other people have things to throw in there, because I'm not the font of all knowledge on this, I can assure you.
Well, I'd love to open it to the floor now.
Yeah.
If anyone has any contributions on this, what is the little insight or the perspective that we could give to a guy to help him, just to give him the sense that change is possible? Damien?
Yeah, just on some of the stuff that you're trying to talk about, what really leads to your hoping is a deeper sense of happiness, a happier time that you have left, or you have on this planet. So you know, and I'm really conscious of what Sarah said, that for a lot of people themselves are actually, I'm not, you know, like there's so many other problems, but if you've less conflict in your life and you're more engaged, you know, you live a better life. And I think it's that notion that there's a better life to be had. And, you know, even for somebody who thinks they're having a great life and a wonderful life, you know, that they've all the money they want to do anything they like, they can protect themselves in a bubble and live a very, you know, as they see it. What allows you to is a greater engagement with everyone. You know, you're in a better place to engage with people and be more fulfilled.
I think the other word is hope. I think hope, you're offering hope, which is something we'll talk about later on today. But I just think it is it's not just a kind of a aspirational thought. It can be quite pragmatic and practical as well.
That's lovely.
And I think a sense of belonging. So like when they feel they are welcome in the community they are in, then they have that sense of belonging. So they'll be able to engage.
I think that is so important, because I think so much of what kind of keeps men in place is that sense that they are trying to belong, and the place that they're trying to belong is a very conventional, you know, it's a very conventional and narrow definition of society and of self. And if we can offer them a sense of belonging in a more generous and free place, I think you're absolutely right. It would both open up the possibility and it would challenge that sense of isolation or loneliness that men have, that is always there as a threat for men. Any other thoughts?
The freedom to work.
Freedom to work.
Yeah. Being seen as a working class person, like, you know.
Well, what we have here is, you know, with these kind of 3 slides, what we have to offer, where we're coming from, what we have to offer, what the challenges are, this sense of who might be good points of influence for men and boys, and the type of offer, the type of information that might help them get a sense of hope and opportunity and alternative. And this would really be kind of the starting point for campaigning. What you would start doing then is working with that to perhaps do more testing, but also perhaps start your messaging, start building your campaign and building your allies to the point where you're in a position to you know, just build momentum and go get more public with that. So I hope that has been somewhat useful. As I say, it's, you know, I try to make it as close to a regular working meeting as possible.
No, I appreciate that, Adam, and I didn't know I was going to get the benefit of all that experience on the day. I think I would have prepared a bit more to get that, so I could pick those 3 slides and start moving on to the next thing. But I think that is it's a piece of work that we should have to continue at some other stage with it, and bring more people into it as well, which would be fantastic. Again, thank you. We are coming up to the time, so I'm going to say thanks again, Adam. Really appreciate your time and effort, and everyone who attended as well and their contributions.